Hello, and welcome to another episode. In this episode, I'd like to talk about something that comes up quite a lot, and that is how to get the most out of your telescope. To answer this question, I've come up with 10 tips that you can do to get more out of your telescope. Well, the first one is choose your location really carefully. You can't use your telescope inside the house and expect good results. Unfortunately, if you do try to use your telescope inside the house, looking through a window for instance, it will distort the view because you're putting an extra bit of not from dirty glass in front of the telescope. If you try to open the window and look out that way, what you'll get is you'll get a load of haze that comes out of the hot house meeting the cold air, which will reduce the quality of the image you see. So try to find somewhere outside that is dark, away from any light sources, and if any stray lights do come in from neighbours or something like that, then I would suggest creating some kind of barrier by using a sheet or something just to block that stray light before it gets to your telescope. Well, on to tip number 2. The next thing you should do, which is always a good idea to do before you actually go out observing during the day, is to actually align your telescope with your finder scope. If you do this, it'll help you find the targets you want to see, which will always make your night observing a lot more fruitful. Tip number 3. Always let your telescope cool down. This is quite a strange one to think about, but if you take your telescope from inside a warm house into a cold garden, often the telescope will start to contract and air currents and so on will be moving in it in strange ways as it cools down. So if you try and use your telescope immediately, you'll find that your images are slightly distorted. So you need to give it between 10 to 20 minutes to cool down in a colder outside before you go on and do something else. 4. You need to protect your telescope from dew. This is quite important. If dew forms on the objective lens or inside your optics, you'll find that you're basically looking through a small amount of water, so you'll find that your views are all blurry. The simplest method to do this, and most telescopes do come with one, is to put a dew cap on the end. And this is kind of a piece of material, a cylinder that goes out from your objective lens or the end of the tail a bit further, just to give the dew somewhere to sit, to form on rather than your objective lens. If this is not enough, and it may not be, especially if you're observing in particularly cold conditions, then you may need a dew heater. Now these can cost around about £20 upwards, depending on the size of your telescope, but they are well worth it if it's a constant problem for you, because with a dew heater it will just eliminate the dew problem entirely. 5. Now this is an important one. You need to ensure your telescope is collimated. Now this only really applies to reflectors and Smith-Cassegrain telescopes, but this is where the optics are actually aligned inside the telescope, so you make sure the mirrors are all matching up. Now, if they're not aligned, you'll find that your stars and planets and so on are not properly sharp, but they'll be maybe off to one side, like bulging on one side or something like that, or never quite focused. So you really need to make sure your telescope is collimated before you try and use it. I always recommend you trying to do that with a artificial star during the daytime rather than try and do it at night. I've got a video here on how you can focus your Smith-Cassegrain telescope. 6. Strangely, often people don't think about this, but your mount is actually as important as your telescope. A wobbly mount will give you bad views, simply because the mount is wobbling, and that means the telescope was wobbling, which means your image is wobbling, so you get a blurry image as it shakes around in the eyepiece. Of course, not everyone has the money to get a more expensive mount, so one good technique, if you can't do that, is actually to weigh it down. Something as simple as a carrier bag or a bag filled with some weight, like a water bottle or something like that, attach the bottom of the tripod on a hook or something, just to pull the whole thing down so it's more firmly to the ground so that it doesn't move. You'll find that will improve your views a great deal. Point 7 is actually your eyes. Your eyes are basically the camera for your telescope, so you need to ensure that your eyes are working in peak performance. Now, how do you do that? The first thing, you need to dark adapt your eyes. That means when you go outside to do astronomy, you need to wait at least 20 to 30 minutes for your eyes to get used to the dark, which is great because it also ties in with the cool down time of your telescope. Now, you don't want to ruin your eyes, so try and leave your mobile phone at home. And also, if you are going to read something like a star chart or something like that, use a red light. So the easiest way to do this is to put a film over your over a torch and use that to shine onto the page. That using a red light will stop your night vision being destroyed. The other thing is to keep good condition in your eyes. Now, what you need to do is to drink plenty of water. This always helps with the viewing. Don't drink alcohol before viewing anything, observing in astronomy. And also try and take some vitamin A. This also helps with what you'll be able to see. Point 8. Now, this is always one that gets out at beginners, and this is use the correct magnification for your telescope. Often you'll see telescopes advertised with massive magnifications. This telescope is capable of 600 times magnification. And while technically the eyepieces they give you and the Barlow lenses combined may be able to give you that magnification, it's not actually useful. Useful magnification you can usually determine by it's about 50 times magnification by 1 inch of objective lens. So if you've got a 3-inch refractor, for instance, then the maximum magnification you can expect to achieve will be about 150 times. However, this can be exceeded in certain circumstances. So if you've got exceptional viewing, you might be able to push the limit a bit further than that and be able to see magnify even more. But you've got to remember, when you magnify, it doesn't just increase the size of what you're viewing. It also decreases the brightness. So a lot of targets will appear more washed out, which means you won't get as much from it. So it may not be a good idea to push it too far. But with some targets, this is possible, especially bright targets like the moon or Jupiter, for instance. Point 9 is going back to your eyes again. Now, this one is a great technique, and it's because of the nature of your eyes. They're not actually uniform in how they detect light. The middle of your eyes, what you usually look for it through, is mainly set up for collecting colour light, which is great when you're walking around on the planet, but not so great if you're looking in a dark night sky. So what you want to do is look slightly off from the actual object you're looking at. So don't look directly at it. Instead, look slightly away. Best to wait to go towards where your nose is. Look slightly off that way. And what will happen is the light, instead of hitting those colour cones in your eye, it will hit the black and white cones. Now, they're a lot more sensitive to low level light, so you should be able to see a lot more detail. And that will always help you when you're doing astronomy. It's a great technique to learn. It takes a little bit of practice, but once you've got it, you'll find that what you can see with your for your telescope increases massively. Point 10. Now, this is basically some accessories that may help you when you're observing. Now, if you bought the telescope straight out of the box, you've probably got a diagonal with it. Maybe not, depending on the type of telescope you've got. But if you have got a diagonal, it's probably going to be a cheap diagonal. They usually don't put much money into it. And so what you usually find is that the mirror, if it's a mirror diagonal, is only about 90% reflective. So what you can do is I would suggest if you want to improve your optics a bit, is to get a better diagonal. This can often improve the sharpness and contrast, as well as the brightness a bit. Another thing is, if you're using a eyepiece below 6mm, you probably want to get a more expensive one rather than the cheaper eyepieces in that range, because it's more critical that what the job they're doing at that particularly high magnifications. Now, most of us live in light polluted areas, so another good idea would be to get a broadband light pollution filter, and this will help you with most targets. It will get rid of most of the light pollution, not all of it, but it'll get rid of most of it and increase the contrast of your image, of your views. If you have enough money, I would also suggest, if you like particular things such as nebulas, I would suggest getting a nebula filter, because a broadband filter doesn't usually quite work so well on nebulas. Well, I hope you found these top 10 tips useful for getting the most out of your telescope. If you do have any questions, then please do leave them in the comments below. I'm always happy to answer them. And if you'd like to see more astronomy videos, then please do subscribe. It really helps out the channel. And give this video a like if you like what I'm doing, because then I will make more. Goodbye and clear skies.